Hello everyone and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Establishing a Security Ambassador Program. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Cassie Clark, Security Community Manager for Developers within Salesforce, John Herron, Information Security Manager for Diageo, and Lance Spitzner of SANS Securing the Human. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. We will be answering them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webcast is being recorded and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Lance.
All right, thank you so much, Carol. And folks, thank you so much for joining us today for Security Ambassadors. I'm really excited about today because Security Ambassador programs are really where I see awareness programs taking their program to the next level. But even more exciting, instead of listening to me drone on for an hour, we have brought in some of the world's experts on building ambassador programs because they're actually doing it. So as Carol mentioned, my name's Lance Spitzner. I'm a director at SANS Securing the Human, and this is part of our series of our monthly webcasts on Meet the Expert. So who are our experts today and what are we going to be learning? As mentioned, my name's Lance Spitzner, and I'm going to give you a short, brief 5 to 10 minute introduction on what ambassador programs are all about, why you'd want to consider them, and how they can help you. And then Cassie and John are going to share with you how they deployed ambassador programs in their organization and how you can take their lessons learned and apply it in your own organization. And then as Carol mentioned, at the end of this webcast, we'll open this up to questions and answers so you can ask any one of us any question you like. So with that said, let me jump right in and give you a brief overview of what ambassador programs are all about. And first of all, why? Why do we care about ambassador programs, and how can it help us? Well, think of the security awareness maturity model, what you're looking at here. This was developed 6 years ago by a team of 200 security awareness officers. And it's a very simple framework that enables you to visualize where your awareness program is and where you want to take it. Now, traditionally, a lot of awareness programs start at the simplest level, and this is compliance focused. This is developed by auditors to check the box. This is where you get an awareness program, maybe, death by PowerPoint once a year. If I ask someone if they have an awareness program and they say yes, but then I ask, do you like the awareness program? And they say no, then you're probably at the compliance focus stage. You're not changing behavior, you're checking the box. Now, where I see our community really getting active is rebooting their awareness programs to change behavior. This is where managing human risk. And this is actually where the greatest percentage of security awareness programs are. About 50% of security awareness programs that I work with are at this stage. And an excellent example of this is phishing. Phishing assessments, phishing training is a wonderful and a powerful way to train and manage a very common human risk. But I'm starting to run into a lot of organizations where they're coming to me and they're going, Lance, we're actually starting to change human behavior. We're having a phishing program. What's next? And what's next is this stage. And this is a much more mature stage of the awareness program. So in the previous stage, changing behavior, you can start changing organizational behavior in 6 months. But to really move to the next stage and actually start changing culture, That takes 3 to 10 years. But one of the most effective ways I'm seeing organizations do this is through the ambassador program. So if you're doing fishing, and that's an important stage, you're still at stage 3. But one of the most effective ways to change culture, and remember, culture is just not behavior, but people's attitudes, perceptions, and beliefs in cybersecurity. Ultimately, people start believing, yeah, this cybersecurity stuff really works. And I can see the benefits. People are not only hacking me at work, but trying to hack me at home, and I'm able to stop it. Or organ departments start asking you to come brief them on cybersecurity. And where I'm seeing globally, any industry, any organization in any country, where they're having the best and most effective impact at changing culture is ambassador programs. So the question is, why should I care about ambassador programs? Because if you're stuck in stage 3 and you want to take your awareness program to the next level, hands down, what I'm seeing at a global level is ambassador programs. So the problem it addresses, and the reason why so many organizations are moving to this, is A, not enough time. How do you scale yourself? You're just one person, or maybe a team, or 2 or 3 people, if you're lucky. But yet you've got to reach 10,000, 50,000, or even just 1,000 people. You probably don't have enough time. Surprisingly, communications is quite often a blocker in a lot of organizations, or they slow things down. Wouldn't it be great if you developed your own direct communications channel to your employees and staff? Employees are not listening to you. Ambassador programs can help address that, and I'll show you here in a moment how. Maybe you have offices all over the country or all over the world. Because so many people are remote from you, it's hard to reach them. And then finally, maybe one of the challenges you're facing is not only reaching people and pushing information out, but you're getting little to no feedback on what is and what is not working. Ambassador programs are a very effective, low-cost way to address these problems. So what exactly is an ambassador program? We've been talking about it. So first of all, don't get caught up in the term ambassador program, because I have seen it called so many different things all over the world. Ambassadors, champions, advocates, sentinels. What it really comes down to is this. It's where you're tapping volunteers throughout your organization. They're not technical, they're not IT, they're not security people. They represent the very people whom you're trying to reach. Marketing, sales, faculty, staff, students, doctors, nurses, lawyers, researchers, accountants, whatever. Your goal is to mobilize a network of volunteers who will help spread your message and put information out. And there's a tremendous number of advantages here that address all the problems. A, scalability. You're creating a network of ambassadors embedded throughout the organization. 2, employees are probably far more likely to listen to their peers than to you. So having a problem reaching a group of doctors, you mobilize a doctor to be an ambassador, and the other doctors are more likely to listen to that person than potentially you. Same thing for faculty, lawyers, engineers, linemen, regardless of what industry you're in. We're finding that these ambassadors can far more effectively engage and push your message to their peers. You're now not so much bypassing communications, but you are in some ways, in that you are creating your own communications network. So you determine not only what message gets put out, but when and how. And then finally, you're creating your own network of embedded spies throughout your organization. So they're providing feedback on what is working in awareness, what's not working, perhaps what risks you should be concerned on. And then finally, ambassador programs are relatively very much low cost. What ends up happening is these volunteers are working on their own time for you. On average, roughly, an ambassador means they're volunteering 4 hours of their time a month to contribute to the program. So the real cost to you is not going to be budget, but also time for you. What I'm starting to see, and I was just talking about Cassie and John about this, is roughly it's going to take half of a dedicated FTE, half of a full-time employee to manage your ambassador program, to coordinate the efforts of the ambassadors, provide them training, provide them materials, coordinate with their bosses, provide metrics to senior leadership. So cost is not in money terms, cost is half of an FTE. This is why I tend to find ambassador programs tend to be in the more mature stage, in that I don't recommend ambassador programs for organizations that are brand new to cybersecurity. Instead, wait until you have both the resources and support. And by resources, I mean time. So the key thing to the ambassador program is you have volunteers. So now the question becomes, how do you motivate these volunteers? In other words, hey, why should I work 4 hours a month for you? And then we have to enable them. So the two key things to getting people to do this, and both Cassie and John will be sharing their secret sauce, is motivation. We have to motivate. Do not use money. You do not have the budget, and we overestimate money as a motivator. Recognition. I'm talking things like emailing their boss and copying that ambassador and letting their boss know the great job the ambassador is doing. Have the CIO or the CEO email all the ambassadors once a year. I know one organization where ambassadors get to have lunch with the CEO. Give them a certificate, coffee mug, shirt, name tag. There's so many ways to recognize ambassadors. Let them know they're going to network through people throughout the organization, helping them build and promote their career in ways they would never have access to. They'll have cybersecurity on their resume. Who doesn't want that? Not only do we want to be sure we motivate them, but we also want to be sure we enable them. So things like training, give them some basic security 101 basic training. Also provide them resources, FAQs, newsletters, slide decks, and things like that. I have seen so many different organizations approach these problems in so many different and unique ways. However, a consistent theme I've seen is this. A, you want to find volunteers. B, you want to be sure you both motivate those volunteers to be successful and enable them to be successful. And C, ultimately, to build a successful ambassador program, it's not a question of how big your budget is. It's a question of how much time can you dedicate to managing your ambassador program. And as I mentioned earlier, I recommend at a starting point at least half of an FTE. Okay, enough talking from me. We've laid that groundwork. What I'd like to do now is hand this over to one of our two guest speakers, and Cassie will now explain what her Champions program is and the secret sauce to it at Salesforce. Cassie, you're on. Okay, Cassie,
Thanks.
you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. It's all yours.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Lance. I'm excited to join today and share a bit about our Security Champions program here at Salesforce. Again, I'm Cassie. I'm the Security Community Senior Representative on the security team at Salesforce. And I was hired as a community manager for internal developers and engineers, and I manage our Security Champions program. So, as Lance mentioned, there are several forms of Security Ambassadors programs, or as we call it, Security Champions. So I wanted to take just a minute to illustrate what Salesforce's Security Champions program is all about. We call it Security Champions because our program is focused around engaging developers and engineers on security in particular, as opposed to enlisting folks within the entire company. So I can see where this might seem like a small program. Maybe you don't have a ton of developers in your company or even no developers. So I'm going to put this into perspective for you. We have around 30,000 people across the globe here at Salesforce, and our developer force makes up about 25% of our company. So it's a lot. Our Security Champions program works as a training initiative for developers here at Salesforce, so we provide them with training that's customized for their unique team. This gives them the tools and the know-how to be able to conduct security testing for their teams and speak up on their team about security matters. Basically, it's pretty cool. Beyond that, though, we also focus strongly on the community aspect of our program. We want our champions to feel valued and like they're a part of something bigger. So like Lance said, it's the ability, you give them the training, and then the motivation. You're providing the community and something for them to hold on to. And this combination of training and community has really helped us engage our developers in a meaningful way, and what we believe is a crucial part of our success with this program. So before I get into how our program works, I wanted to give just a brief summary of the history of our Security Champions program in order to illustrate what it could look like if you were to start to build a program similar to this. So this program was created in 2013 by our awesome product security team. While our developers are great, no question about that, our security team was struggling to collaborate with them on some security matters, and it led to a lot of frustration from both sides of the table when our security review cycles would come around. So one product security engineer decided to work with his teams proactively and train them on common security vulnerabilities, hoping that they would be empowered to incorporate security during the design and the build phases. He enlisted just one team to participate as a pilot, and just like that, our Security Champions program was born. Unfortunately, no metrics were taken at the time, but the program was received with a lot of anecdotal success, and it gradually expanded to more and more teams, all of which saw a lot of success. As the program grew, they not only saw value in providing training to champions, but also in the relationships that were built as a result. In June of 2016, the security team decided to expand the program significantly to all product teams, so they hired a dedicated community manager to focus on the program, and that's where I come in. Since I joined, we've scaled our program rapidly and continue to grow. We started at around 60 champions when I joined, and we currently have over 250 champions, most of whom have been nominated by their managers, and we're continuing to scale the program to include our core infrastructure teams and our acquisitions. Whew. So as I mentioned, training and community are both essential to the success of our Security Champions program. Since the beginning, we have focused on providing dedicated training that's customized to each team and their unique challenges and products. So therefore, we give champions advanced training on how to conduct security testing that is directly relevant to their team, often using examples from security bugs that have been fixed in the past. In addition, we have champions do hands-on exercises during the training to help the material sink in and give them time to ask questions about tools. It's regularly updated to reflect recent bugs and vulnerabilities so the training remains relevant. During the training, champions also learn how to escalate security concerns and to begin testing in their own environments. And each of these trainings is conducted by their security team partner, so they start building that one-to-one relationship with security right off the bat. Our program aims to give participants advanced skills and training to find security vulnerabilities, absolutely. But the community aspect is equally important. We focus on connecting with developers, helping them feel valued and engaged, or like Lance was saying, that motivation aspect. This works in two ways. First, we build a relationship with each developer in our program. Remember, we have over 250 developers, so it's a big deal when we say that we develop a relationship with each and every single one. Each champion has a security team partner who works with them one-to-one on security matters. Think of this as almost a mentoring relationship. They work through the process together, and the champion has a tangible, accessible person they can go to when they need support or have questions. I'm not saying that we have 250 security folks who are out there being a team partner. Really what works is it's more like a 10 to 20 champions to one security team partner. But our security team partners are working across a ton of different teams, so this is really natural to their workflow. Creating these relationships also reinforces our Security Champions program as a whole because it embraces one of our company's key cultural values, Ohana, or what is known as family. The other side of this is community engagement. This part focuses on motivating our developers even further to participate in the program. For us, it includes hosting lunches or happy hours, giving out exclusive swag, and having fun interactive activities like a scavenger hunt or a CTF hackathon where our champions got to break fake websites to learn how to build products more securely. Don't worry, we told them a lot not to break real websites. We also created an icon for champions to identify with. That image there on the slide is Siguri, the Security Champions koala. The champions got to vote on his name, so they had a sense of ownership in the process. And for those who are wondering, Siguri means security in Albanian. He's a total hit. We also communicate in several ways to our champions. So we have trainings, sure, but we also talk to them over email, our internal networking system, Google Hangouts, and in person from time to time. In the end, community not only encourages champions to continue participating in the program, but it also creates a security-first mindset in their teams. Community shows our developers that we care about them as people, and it continues to secure their buy-in moving forward. So our program has been around since 2013, and it's mature, but we've really only been running it at full speed for about a year. In that time, we've had some trial and error, and we've discovered a lot of successes and some challenges to work through, so I wanted to share just a few of those with you today. Overall, we've seen some really great success with our Security Champions program. Most importantly, because this is one of our program's key objectives, most teams know how to find and fix common security vulnerabilities and how to escalate security concerns. Awesome. In addition, as I mentioned, the community aspect of our program has been really successful at motivating participation from some champions, so we really want to expand that significantly over the next year. And as a part of that, champions have also started to embrace the community vibe and reach out to us in security more, but also to one another. They're starting to use each other as resources, which was a fantastic result we really did not foresee. That being said, there are also some challenges that we're still working through. Right now, our developers are still incredibly busy with functionality testing, and they're not able to prioritize security testing, which means that our security team still conducts the majority of testing on common issues. We're going to focus on updating our leading execs on the program in order to get more visibility and more adoption throughout our teams to help with this. In addition, we have a ton of champions who all have different motivations for wanting to participate in the program. One of the key challenges for security awareness practitioners is finding a way to speak to all stakeholders, and our program is no different. Finally, we've grown significantly in 1 year, and we're about to scale much more. And scaling rapidly is hard. It takes a strategic balance to make sure we have the right coverage on our teams and that we're training and engaging people effectively the whole time. They're all challenges that we're eager to work on, but they are challenges nonetheless. So if you're interested in building your own Security Champions or Ambassadors program, which I imagine you are since you're listening to this webcast right now, you want to take some of the following steps to start. So first, you want to build out a plan of attack. Gather your crucial information, like what are your objectives for creating a Champions program? What will success look like? What resources will you need to succeed? And like Lance mentioned, it's not just financial resources, but especially staff resources. And ideally, you would dedicate at least a half-time, full-time employee to this initiative. For reference, I spend probably 75% of my full-time job on this program, and we will be expanding that in the future because our program is so large. To inform your program plan, I also highly recommend getting input from your stakeholders so you can know what really motivates them. What would make them want to participate in your program? How much do they value training versus community versus they just want a bunch of free stuff? This will not only help you structure your program more successfully, it'll also help with your marketing efforts. You also want to build a lot of collaboration into your plan. Our program would never have been successful if we didn't have amazing collaboration with our fellow security team members. Working with other teams is absolutely essential to making these programs successful. I really cannot emphasize that highly enough. And then remember, it takes a long time for people to change their behaviors and adopt secure habits. So make sure you're building in time and flexibility into that plan. Then, once you have a solid plan to present, focus on getting your leadership buy-in. This will, of course, work differently at each organization, but is essential to getting your teams to adopt your program. At Salesforce, for example, once we decided to scale our program, we talked to the executives in our technology and products team, which houses both our developers and our security team. We presented our program efforts to date and our ideas for the future. Once they saw how effective this program could be, they sent out communications to their teams. This suddenly told teams that management cared about security and about this program, and therefore they should jump on board and participate. Without that support, we would have spent countless hours struggling to get teams to give us their time. We're a busy place after all. Just be prepared. You'll also want to present back to leadership once your program is operational to show why it was a good choice and reinforce their support. Get those dollar bills. Finally, once you have leadership buy-in, give that program a test run. Select somewhere between 1 to 3 teams or so to work with as a pilot phase and see if your program can grow legs. Just don't forget about those metrics like we did the first time. They'll help you build that program a lot quicker and refine it along the way. A few metrics that have worked well for us include the number of teams that have a trained champion, so we know how many teams have received dedicated training, and the number of times our champions have talked with security team partners. Less is not necessarily better here. Even a brief check-in is good. Think about what your objectives are and then build out your metrics from there. And with that, thanks so much for taking the time to hear about our program here at Salesforce. If you want to hear a little more, I'll also be talking about building security champions programs at the SANS Summit in August with my wonderful co-presenters from Adobe and Dropbox. And now I'd like to pass it over to John Herron, who's done some amazing work on security champions programs at Diageo.
John, you there, bud?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, you're on.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Cassie. Thanks for that presentation. My name is John Herron. I work for Diageo based in Dublin in Ireland. I've worked for Diageo for about 18 years now in a range of IT roles. I've specifically worked in the security, information security arena for about 7 years. And I look after governance, risk and compliance primarily, but I have accountability for my favorite subject, which is the Security Awareness Program. And I wanted to give you an overview today of the network of security champions in Diageo and how we've been able to do this over the last 3 or 4 years. I think it's important to state at the start that what I am going to cover is applicable for all organizations, in my view. It's applicable for small, medium and large organizations. As Lance suggested, there's little or no cost associated with it. In my view, it's primarily all about the will and the consistency to succeed and to achieve those goals. Okay, so a little bit of background first to give you some context. Diageo is a global leader in beverage alcohol. We have 30,000 people in our organization. And you may be aware of our company name, but you're certainly aware of some of the brands that we have. You know, we have #1 Scotch in the world in Johnny Walker, the #1 premium vodka in Smirnoff, the #1 liqueur in Baileys, and the #1 stout in the iconic Guinness brand, which is brewed here in Dublin. We produce 6.5 billion litres of alcohol annually on 30 supply sites in 100 countries. We sell our products in 180 countries, and we have the ambition to be the best performing and most trusted consumer goods company in the world. And you can understand from that type of ambition that it's very, very important to protect our product information, our consumer information, customer information, and employee information. So it's very critical that people have good understanding of information security fundamentals. And that is where our security champions come in. But a little bit of theory before we move on. Lance regularly highlights this book, and I must say I agree with how good it is. It's a book written in 2014 by a guy called John Cotter, who's a change management guru. And in there, he explains that rapid change can't be driven from a centralized location alone. You need to use a distributed network throughout a large organization in particular, using change agents that he called accelerators. And this is exactly what our program uses at Diageo with our security champions. They support understanding at a local level in so many ways. And just in terms of Diageo champions, our definition of the champions are those volunteers from primarily IT service delivery teams in our markets, of which there's 21 markets. And they essentially help their peers and co-workers and other people in the markets get a better understanding of security policies. They act as the go-to people in their market for information security and policy queries. And you know, I really admire them because they effectively do a volunteering job on top of their day job to support both their markets and support my team in pushing those communications out to other parts of the business. So when I created this network back in 2014, just in terms of scope, what was I up against? I started with we had 30,000 people in the organization and 21 markets. There was effectively two of us doing half a job each, so one full-time equivalent person. But our security policy was effectively only one of 15 global policies across the company. We were losing the communications battle against those other global policies. And, you know, we were pushing information out on a centralized basis, but we really weren't getting sufficient feedback from the markets about what worked well, what didn't work well, what people were understanding and what were they not understanding. So something needed to be done. I could just sense that we weren't going to mature with a model that we had. So at that point, I decided that we needed to create a Security Champions network. Now, I initially started with at a regional level with 5 people, one person in each region. And for about 6 or 8 months, that was the way it progressed. The challenge really was that that wasn't sufficient. I found that one person in a region, if you think about the number of markets in a region, there could have been anywhere from 8 to 10 markets. It's quite difficult for people to engage on a regular basis with everybody, or certainly even a subset of people in those markets. So I quickly realized that we needed to extend that right down to market level in order to create that win-win situation between our central security team and the markets. So I started to grow that at a market level up to the point where we have it today, where we have 40 champions across all of our markets. So how did I do this from the start? Initially, I wanted to make sure that we had very, very clear objectives. Now, and this was just for my program initially. So I wanted to make sure that I had the network in place within 12 months. I wanted a fully functioning network within about 18 months. But I had also clear goals in terms of improving understanding around information security and behavior change, which I was going to measure. I was going to try to improve incident reporting. I wanted to try to reduce the number of breaches at a market and a regional level. So once I had identified what those goals were, I then needed to start my sales pitch, and that took a little bit of time. So I had to identify each of the stakeholders, and those are the stakeholders on points 3 to 6, and I literally documented what were the benefits for each of these guys. Why should they care about a network of champions? What's in it for them? So I started at the top. I started with the CTO. I got his buy-in, explained why it was important to him, and most importantly, I highlighted the fact that there was going to be no cost to him, which was a big selling point, as you can imagine. I then moved to the regional IT managers, and again, tried to sell it to them, tried to explain how this network of champions will be able to support the business better, will be able to reduce security issues, will be able to make sure that there's better compliance to policy at a market level. And then I moved to probably the more difficult area, and that was the line managers, those potential line managers of the champions themselves. Because remember, I was going to be asking these people to give their people's time up. So I wanted to make sure that there was something in it for them, that they understood how they were going to be the de facto support people for security in their markets, but that they would also be able to be seen to support their people's development and their career development, and that I was going to help them by training their people. And that was a big selling point for them. And finally, I had to sell it to the champions themselves. What was in it for them? So there was certainly skills development, in some cases career progression, and quite a lot of people were very interested in those ideas. And quite a lot of people wanted to volunteer simply because it was a security area and it was something that they had a personal interest in. So once I created my network, you know, there are ways that we engage with these people on a regular basis, with these champions. So we run monthly sessions for half an hour, but we also run training sessions on a monthly basis as well. And we use things that you might imagine, like teleconferences, like video conferences. We're big users of WebEx, particularly in relation to training. We use SharePoint to share our documentation. We have a training portal which we use and to try to disseminate a lot of our training material. Where we have security people in the markets with the champions, we try to do face-to-face training where possible. We as an organization are also big users of Yammer, Microsoft's social media site. And so we have our own sites for our policy champions, and we request that they use those to disseminate that information throughout their markets. Now, not all of this was plain sailing, unfortunately. We did encounter some issues and some challenges along the way. And I think it's inevitable as you grow and mature your network that you're going to come across at least some of these. Firstly, a culture came up quite quickly. And it's interesting, you know, with a global program, culture is something that is very, very diverse. One of the examples that we saw quite quickly was in how we interacted with different regions on a monthly basis. For example, the calls that we had with the North American groups and the African groups were quite vocal. A lot of interaction, two-way conversations right from the start. Whereas with some of the Asia Pac markets and some of the European markets, it was less vocal, and we had to change our style a little bit to be able to pull out information from the attendees in terms of questions. Similarly with language, you know, everybody in theory speaks English in Diageo, but English is not always their first language. So language was certainly an issue in some cases, but we also had to think of, you know, colloquialisms. Two of the people that regularly support the program are based in Dublin, and so we had to be aware of the language, the colloquial language that we were using, and temper that at times so that people could understand. We found quite quickly also that one size doesn't fit all, and what I mean by that is I work on the principle of it, the 80-20 rule. 80% of the messages were going to be relevant for everybody, but we found that we couldn't be overly prescriptive with everybody. It was important to let the champions develop part of the program themselves based on the risks that they see in their own environment. So for example, in some markets, social engineering is a big problem. In other markets, it's less so. In some markets, accidental loss of confidential information is a huge issue. So we gave the champions the tools and the knowledge to be able to understand these things, but to be able to develop content in a way that was relevant for their market. Similarly, with pockets of weak engagement, with any group of people, and in our case we had 40, we found that pretty consistently 10 to 15% of people were effectively not good engagers, wouldn't turn up on calls, or when they were on calls were, you know, didn't have a lot of interaction with them. So we tried to identify who those people were and try to improve that situation. But I think the biggest issue we found, and Lance mentioned this in his introduction, is motivation. This is what I call the big kahuna in the room, right? And there's a couple of reasons, there's a couple of things that we identified of ways that we could try to improve motivation. And remember, because this is a long-term thing, I think you need to kind of think about this to try to develop motivation over time. So the first thing we tried to do was direct positive feedback where it was warranted to the champions line managers, so that they understood that where they did a really good job, that we let the line managers know, so they could you know, build that into their end of year performance reviews. That was very important. Similarly, and Lance mentioned this, and we've done something similar, we had our CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, communicate to the champions several times to highlight the importance of their network in improving information security in our organization. We actively promoted the champions at a market level also. So if somebody came and asked us questions in the central security team, we'll very much try to push them back to the champion in their local market, thereby, you know, effectively creating the champion as the de facto expert in that market. And that helped to keep that person motivated over time. I think two of the biggest ways that we had to develop motivation were around trying to keep it interesting for the champions themselves. We did this through things like competitions. So we ran a photograph competition for the champions at one stage with a security topic, and asked them to kind of submit 2 or 3 photographs, most of which were quite amusing, and that kind of kept things interesting. We also ran what we call our market passion sessions, asking our champions to highlight some of the best practice that they've used in their markets to get their messages across and present to the other champions. And that created a little sense of competition between the champions, where they tried to outdo each other on a monthly basis, and that was very effective. One interesting thing that we tried to build in also was, again, linked to cultural aspects, to try to build their champions' role into formal goals or development plans where possible. In some areas, we just found that engagement didn't happen where that wasn't built in. And so where it was built in, they felt a compulsion to actually get more involved, and that helped to build motivation over time. We've also found that continuous improvement in a long-term network is very, very important to maintain. Training the champions is absolutely key. You know, you really want to make sure that they develop their skills and capabilities over time in order to be able to support their markets. So certainly training them in security-related content is essential, but we also found that training them in relation to some of the softer skills was also important. So I'm sure Lance would agree that, you know, when you're running a security awareness program, if you leave security awareness to a load of IT people on their own, you know, we tend not to be the greatest communicators in the world. So, you know, we need to either bring outside people in with specialist skills or improve those softer skills themselves. So we've tried to do some training with some comms people, to bring them in, some training people to develop those skills for our champions themselves. Sharing key learnings is also important. Some of these champions came up with ideas we would never have thought of. So we get them to share them with their fellow champions in their region, and sometimes we take those ideas and share them with other people in other regions to make sure that those learnings are spread throughout the globe. Refreshing the network, again, links to the motivation issue earlier, where there's a few people that tend not to be interested over time, and that could be simply because they're busy, they could be simply bored, and that happens as well. We try to identify those. We tend to go back to the line managers, and without any recriminations, we just ask for replacements for those people. And that tends to make sure that we keep a good high standard with our champions on a consistent basis. We also tried to, and I think Cassie mentioned this, try to demonstrate the tangible value to the business. So I like to think of this as the validation back to the senior people who gave us promotion for our program in the first place, those CTOs and regional managers. We try to develop where things go well, try to build, you know, tell them that things have gone well to validate their original support. You know, that's very important from a positive point of view, but also when you go and ask them occasionally for some funding, small amount of funding for parts of your program, by being able to develop that or demonstrate that business value, you're more likely to get a positive response. Similarly, and most importantly, demonstrate the value to the champions themselves. Let them know that the efforts that they're putting in actually make a difference on the bottom line. And that's often where metrics come in, and I can mention that in a minute. So overall, the benefits that I see as a part of our Champions Network are as follows. Firstly, you know, we get our message. We have an annual program. We get our messages delivered right down to market level in a way that is effective at that market level, because every market has different ways of communicating and obviously has different languages as well. We get that essential feedback from markets, things that surveys won't tell you. We get that anecdotal information back from the champions themselves, and that's very, very powerful in terms of helping us continually develop and improve our program. We're seeing an impact on the bottom line. You know, we're seeing reductions in the number of breaches reported at a market and a regional level. We're seeing increases in the number of incidents that are reported, which is what we want to see so that we can respond to them more effectively. We're seeing better compliance to policy. largely because people are understanding policy better, and hence people want to, they want to do the right thing. Low cost, Lance mentioned it again in his introduction. In an ideal world, I would have security people, full-time security people in every one of our markets. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So this is one mechanism that we can use to help get our messages out there at a low cost. And also, finally, it's an effective mechanism to capture metrics at a market level. Things like breaches and incidents are things I mentioned earlier on, but also other metrics that we regularly try to capture are things like related to those behavior changes, things like the classification and handling of information, whether people are using encryption or not, things like phishing testing, clicking on links, but also things like questions around policy aspects of our policy and how many people get those questions right first time. Those things are key metrics to understand how people are changing their behavior and understanding right down at market level. So what's next for our policy champions? There are a couple of things that I'm working on at the moment. Firstly, are what I call my communities of practice. I'm taking subsets of our policy champions, 3 or 4 people in smaller groups, and doing deep dives on one particular topic. What I found is, on top of our training on a monthly basis for everybody in the group, which is very important, what the smaller groups turn out to be very effective in terms of capability build, because within a smaller group, it's harder to hide. As I say, it's harder to sit there doing your emails on a training session with 3 or 4 people when you're expected to engage. So, there's more engagement, and we're finding that people are learning quicker around the topics with those smaller groups. Similarly, with our skills framework, we've created a set of skills, identified and created those skills which are specific for the role the champions play. We've identified 10 areas of experience and 5 skills, and tried to get the champions to score themselves against those areas of experience and skills, to identify where their gaps are, and then to take interventions to improve their capabilities in those areas. And we're trying to monitor those on a quarterly basis to drive continuous improvement. And that's something that I'm spending a lot of time to build in at the moment. Finally, key takeaways in summary. Aim for a win-win situation. I recommend that you really do try to keep this, to treat it as a reciprocal relationship. Gain senior management support first. I think that's very important, to try to build momentum, to get that initial buy-in, but also to try it as it helps you to sustain the network over time. Empower and train your champions. Let them know that they are going to be the experts, and more importantly, that you're going to work to get them there, that you're going to be that support network for them. Build the program into the champions' annual targets and development plans. So that will formalize the role where possible, because that will help sustain it over time. Actively drive continuous improvement, because that will keep it alive over time. This is long term. And finally, be patient and consistent. What I found is that, and this was mentioned again earlier on, you need to invest time to consistently build the network, because you want to build the credibility in the network themselves, but also for the champions to value their role in the network over time, and to want to play as significant a role as possible. Plan for the long term, because this stuff takes time, and don't underestimate how long it takes to have an effective functioning network. So hopefully that was of some use to you guys. That's all I have for you. I have some contact details there for anybody who's particularly interested in any aspects of this, and I'd encourage you to contact me if you're interested. At that, I'll hand over to Lance, and he can highlight some summary points, and we can take some questions.
All right, John, thanks so much. Cassie, thank you. You guys rock. So folks, we're going to hand this over to Q&A right now. Like I said, you got to hear from some of the world's leading experts doing this, but also just wanted to do a quick friendly reminder. If you're interested in learning more, highly recommend the Security Awareness Summit, 2-day event, August in Nashville, Tennessee. And at this two-day event, we're going to learn from our peers and industry leaders on all the amazing things they're doing. So Cassie will be speaking from Dropbox on ambassador programs. So will Cassie from Salesforce, but also Dropbox and Adobe will be there. We're going to be doing escape rooms from Kathy Click from FedEx. We're going to be having the Bank of England joining us. A huge number of organizations all sharing. Also, if you're interested in learning more, we have a two-day class on building awareness programs. We have our annual security awareness report coming out next month. And every month we have a Meet the Expert webcast. If you're interested in learning more, all of this is at that URL, just /events. So let's go ahead, and Carol, let me turn it back over to you. I'm guessing we probably have one or two questions for our speakers.
All right, yes, you're correct, Lance. We do have many questions. However, if anyone has an additional question, for our presenters, please enter it into the questions window now. Our
Carol,
first question.
I was going to say, real quick, I got a feeling we may even run out of time. If we're not able to answer all the questions, where should people email to answer them?
They can send them to q@sans.org, and I'll send that in the chat window in a moment.
Ooh, perfect.
All right, so our first attendee is curious about what takes the largest chunk of time to support the program. Is it interactions with individual ambassadors or some more or large-scale piece of the program?
Ooh, Cassie, we'll start with you on that one, then we'll hand it off to John. But yeah, what does take most of your time? Good question.
That is a fantastic question, and I think it really changes depending on where you're at in your program, where you're at in the planning phase. It kind of goes in a circular motion. So for myself right now, there's a good bulk of time that's purely program management. So coordinating trainings, coordinating and enlisting with the champions, logistics for even the small things that we do for the community. Moving forward, as some people take on more of that role, my role will be significantly heavier on the community side. So it'll be planning different types of events for them or chatting with them at a coffee or things that help them feel a little bit more personalized. So I think it really just depends on your program.
Good point. John, anything you care to add?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think developing the content is a big thing for us to make sure that we engage directly with the champions to understand what is most important to them and get their input into the content. That's very important. But even, the planning of those meetings that we have, as well as the training sessions, and we're very big on, developing meeting minutes and that kind of thing to make sure that everybody, and again, this is related to cultural and language, we try to write things down and try to explain things in simple terms, but that all takes time after the meetings as well as in advance to make sure that we have a consistent response to all of the champions across the globe. So don't underestimate the amount of time that takes in terms of documentation.
Cool. All right, Carol, next question.
All right, thanks. These next two questions are fairly similar, and they're both for Cassie. What specific metrics did you gather for your pilot or your later attempts at the ambassador program? And another registrant asks, are there any other metrics that Salesforce has established for their security ambassador program?
Yeah, this is a great question, or I guess two-part question, specifically because we've struggled a little bit to identify what metrics matter most to us, and there's a really big reason for that. And it comes with collaboration again, so this is why it's so great to collaborate. I did not intend to rhyme that. When we originally started this pilot program, my team, the security awareness team, thought it would be great to see a decrease in the amount of bugs found over time. And what we eventually heard back was, actually, that's the opposite of what you want. You want an increase in bugs found, if anything. And then we realized, well, actually, maybe it's best if we don't even think about that part at all, because really what we want is we want an increase in bugs found by champions, but we also want an increase in larger bugs and vulnerabilities found by our product security team. And it doesn't really speak to the type of bug it is. So if it's a whole bunch of little bugs versus one that's a little bigger, et cetera. And so we decided to scrap that from learnings from our pilot phase time. Other metrics that we've used is the amount of training or different types of training that champions have gone through. We're working right now on some engagement metrics, so specifically related to how many times do they check in with either myself or their security team partner, usually on our product security team, how many times have they reached out for help? How many instances have they created a security test case? So metrics is really challenging, and it really goes back to thinking about what are those core objectives that you are trying to achieve, and what will show that you've achieved them or haven't achieved them, and how can you constantly iterate on your program in order to make it a successful program. It's a tough question.
All right, thank you.
This,
oh, go ahead, Lance.
Oh, this is Lance. One of the things you can do too, especially for leadership support, is don't forget to also, you can always share your success stories too. So, you know, if you reach out to a group, let's say, you know, there's been training for the accounts payable group, and then all of a sudden you get hit with a highly targeted CEO fraud attack or BEC attack. And because you have an ambassador, a champion there, and the accounts payable quickly picks it up, and that was an attack that normally people would have been fallen victim to, you can quickly demonstrate tremendous ROI by saving your organization thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars based on that. I've actually worked with 2 different organizations where that was the case. Next question.
All right, thanks. I have an attendee who would like me to go back to the slide that has John's contact information. And just as a reminder, a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. Okay, so the next question is, to both presenters, in your view, do the security champions or ambassadors need a technical background in security at the outset? And what are the characteristics and skills that you have found make a good candidate for a security champion?
I'll maybe take that one first. I think the answer is no, you don't need a technical background or a security background. In our organization, we use IT people primarily, but there's no reason why they couldn't be as part of just part of the business, any other function, as long as they have an interest in security. I firmly believe that. In terms of skills, while it helps to have some basic understanding of security, what we found is that, and I think I mentioned it in the presentation, communication skills are absolutely essential, and content development skills also help, because, you know, we want to be able to communicate to people, not just in terms of language, but in the most effective way that works at a local level. So I think those communication skills are absolutely key.
I would definitely agree with that. So actually, with our program, purely by its intention, we only work with developers who do have technical skills because they're developers here at Salesforce. They don't need to have any kind of a security background. We'll teach them those skills. We're happy to invest our time and our energy in that, but they do need to have a certain technical understanding. But I don't think that security ambassador programs at large need that. So, for example, my team also works with people across our entire organization on changing security behaviors. And ambassadors is a great way to do that. Really what you're looking for the majority of ambassador programs is you're looking for people to evangelize security. You don't necessarily need to have technical skills to do that.
All right. I am part of the treasury team at my company and we manage risk. What can we do separate from efforts by our IT team?
That's a kind of a, I'm not sure if I even understand the question. The one thing I would recommend is if you're separate from your cybersecurity team, you don't want to be acting independently of your cybersecurity team. You may want to reach out to them and find out what things you can do to help either your team or help reach out to other folks. Or Cassie or John, do you have anything to add or maybe understand the question differently?
I think I would just reiterate what you said and really collaborate with that security team. Anybody who is dealing with the trenches and the front lines of that, they can give you so much insight into where is your company weak and where do you need to change some behaviors and really utilize those resources.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add to that is, you know, what we've seen when we, and this is broader than just our security champions, but it's certainly relevant, is when we're involved with training and content development with specific functions like that, we try to take examples of incidents and breaches that are directly related to that function rather than generic examples. because by doing that, it really brings it to life for people that are actually being trained.
All right, thank you. Have you found there's a sweet spot in terms of ratio of the number of employees to ambassadors?
I'll go ahead and start with this one. It's going to be different for every single organization. And the reason I say that is I work with Adobe and Dropbox often with my, just talking about our different programs, and they're very different, even though we all work with engineers and we train them on security. So, for example, I believe that Adobe has only 16 champions. And they're a big company as well, but that's what they found really works to invest a ton of time and energy into them, and that is their sweet spot, and they've seen a lot of success with that. And if you remember when I was talking about our program here at Salesforce, we have over 250 champions, and we're planning on scaling that to every single team in our technology and products organization. Every single team will have a champion. So it's really just a matter of what type of program you want to set up, what types of success metrics you have, or success challenges you have, and how your ambassadors might fit into that, from at least from my perspective and experience.
All right. Well,
yeah, and I'd add to that.
Go ahead, John.
Sorry, just to add to that finally, I think it's not just about the number of people. It's also about the amount of time that people can put into it. So as Lance suggested, some people will put in 4 hours a month. That's the minimum amount. In some cases, we have some champions that put in an awful lot more. So it's less about the ratio of the champions to people and the amount of time that they can actually put in, and that's the big challenge.
All right. Well, with that, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Cassie, John, and Lance, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, you can visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.